Hello. Show up and do the thing is a thing that many incredibly smart and intelligent content creators have been saying for many years, but also in the past week, especially because of the beginning of Vlogmas and the output of content that normally brings. Today, I thought I would talk about books and grief, just to start it off on a happy note. I thought I'd run you through a few books. So the first one is called Ghana Must Go. I've inserted it somewhere here, by Taye Selassie. So Ghana Must Go by Taye Selassie is about a family who loses its patriarch. So the head of the family, the father, the husband or ex-husband in this case, dies, and his 4 children and his ex-wife all start coming back together again, and basically the book follows how the parents of the family met, and how they came to be estranged from each other, and how their children also became estranged from themselves, from their siblings, and from their parents. I read it during a time of intense grief in my life, but and it could be the case that this book is enshrined in my heart because of that. But what really struck with me was how certain actions and certain ways of looking at life really stuck with the father, really stuck in the family, and how it kind of proceeded to manifest itself in other generations. But Ghana Must Go also really explored the theme of things like immigration and trying to assimilate into a community, but it also explored things like home, and whether you can ever really call somewhere a home, or whether you can ever really leave the people that you were raised with behind. Ghana Must Go really explores those kind of metaphorical footprints that the people in your life leave, even when they're long gone from your life, especially if they happen to be negative things and negative issues, and residual of trauma, or residual of just bad things happening in your life. It kind of really explores that idea of those things never really leave you, especially if they're not necessarily openly and explicitly addressed. But the way she talks about grief, and the way that she talks about how parents and children can become estranged from each other, and how they become really frustrated with each other, but they still feel completely wrecked by each other's absence from their life in small ways and huge ways, really stuck with me, and I love this book. On to the next book, which I do have with me, is The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. Jandy Nelson's a pretty popular YA author. This book I think is pretty popular on the internet and the blogosphere and the booktube. The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson is about a girl called Lenny whose sister dies, and at the same time she kind of starts falling in love with a boy who moves into her community, her neighborhood. It basically explores these intense emotions. That on the one hand there's this calamity, this complete tragedy, this thing that many times in the book that she can't even comprehend, and then on the other side there's this thing that's blossoming, that's new, that's sweet, that's in its own way incredibly intense and weird and not running in conjunction. And at the same time, this book also follows her growing feelings, and her growing feelings for her sister's boyfriend and what that means. Jandy Nelson's writing has always astounded me. I've never ever read an author that can really spin gold out of a few thin words, and I can't. But what really struck me about this was she kind of really, for the reader, blows the world apart, and kind of explains how especially when you're young, when you're going through something like grief, the world is never the same. The world is never the same again, and the world is blown apart, and some things are so razor sharp and come into clear focus, and some things, but at the same time sometimes it's there's this numbness, and it's different for everyone. And personally, I can only speak for me, but I think for me this book really captured how the world is blown apart, and you have this kind of new vision. It's this process of trying to regroup the world in a way that has to now make sense without the person that you love. And the last book I want to talk about is of course Harry Potter. So Harry Potter, I could talk about Harry Potter for a long time for a number of different reasons. One of the things about Harry Potter that really truly I think keeps it magic is the fact that as a kid you find a lot of the things that Harry goes through with the Dursleys quite funny and quite humorous. That's a lot to do with the fact that J.K. Rowling, I think, deliberately keeps it quite humorous and quite light. But as an adult, I find that the scenes and the chapters where Harry is still with the Dursleys quite disturbing and incredibly sad. One, because it conveys a sort of like, Harry doesn't know his parents. He never gets to know his parents, especially, and doesn't really knows nothing about them in the first few books. The loneliness that is conveyed in those chapters that you read as an adult is quite devastating. The Dursleys they're quite abusive towards Harry, and I think one of the not even in the way that, you know, they put him in a cupboard, and in this Chamber of Secrets they like put bars on his window, and kind of semi-starve him, but like in the way that really got to me was the fact that they left him out of so many of the celebrations that they threw for Dudley, and the fact that they didn't even want him to go to the zoo in the first book. The beauty of Harry Potter and the sadness about reading it is that as a reader, you're reading it in the self-aware vein where, at least for me, I'm reading it as an adult, and I'm also getting the, you know, in the back of my head, I have on the lens I had on as a kid, and I'm fascinated by kind of the differences, as you are when you reread an old childhood favourite. So there's also that kind of like nostalgia stroke grief for the kid you once were, who was reading Harry Potter for the first time and becoming really excited for the story, which is a feeling that I only really get with Harry Potter and probably a few other favourites. But there's also like the grief of the fact that I didn't notice all those things when I was a kid, and I didn't notice all the kind of untold hurts that Harry goes through, but you notice it as an adult. Harry is grieving in a way for the life that he doesn't have. Harry Potter dealing with grief and dealing cards all the time. So those are my books on grief. There are so many more I could talk about. Please do tell me if you do watch this video, please do tell me if there are any books that doesn't necessarily have to be grief, but if there are any books that have helped you through specific emotions, I'd be really interested to hear. Thank you for watching. Bye.